Isn't that the saying for 2020? Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this live stream with me, Dr. Aparajita Jeedigunta. I am the founder and CEO of AJ Rao, where we believe in making the invisible visible for intentional equity, for better belongingness, better leadership, and all of the things that we need in life to co-create a more stable and a more prosperous future for all of us, whether we are entrepreneurs, whether we are stay-at-home individuals, or whether we are corporate business leaders. Our path forward, especially now, is about co-creating this future together, because when all of us get together, we can collectively shape our future into exactly what we want it to be. So if you're watching this live, let me know in comments. And if you're watching this later, let me know that as well. I would love to talk to you and answer any questions you have and have a conversation. My live stream episode today is about the easy thing to do versus the right thing to do. And what is the future of equity and inclusion when we think about the easy thing to do versus the right thing to do? Now, I don't think it's going to come as a surprise to anybody watching this live or later that the context for today's talk is everything that happened in the US election week. Last week. Yeah, we didn't have a day. We had a whole week, and we finally had some declarations based on the projections on Saturday. And one of the big things, that I saw in the context of this election, and of course that all of us saw, and many of us even sort of commented on this in one way or another, is the extreme amounts of gloating and shaming that was happening. Given how in 2016, the winning party, people who voted for the winning party back then were gloating and shaming. And now in 2020, the winning party, whoever voted for the winning party, is gloating and shaming back in return. Now, I'm not necessarily trying to make this political at all. But the reality of the matter is that where we are in the country, where we are as people, as Americans right now, many of the issues in this election transcended politics. What was at stake here was, and I have notes for this one, what was at stake here really was the idea of the American identity and the reality of the inequities and disparities that we have been facing over and over and over across racial constructs, across gender constructs, across class constructs, and so on and so forth. Now, because of this win, this historic win in many ways, there was a lot of gloating and shaming again. And there was also a lot of buckling down that I was seeing coming from a lot of people, a buckling down of especially if these are people who voted for the party that didn't win. There was a lot of buckling down on why they still continue to support the current administration and why they don't support the incoming administration. And there was also a lot of whataboutisms from trolls, and just briefly, what is a whataboutism? It's when you're talking about one issue. For instance, last Monday, when I was talking about cultural identity and cultural appropriation, and I had somebody jump in on my comments and ask me about airplanes and if we should give white people credit for airplanes. I'm still wrapping my mind around that, but that is a whataboutism. When you bring in something that's irrelevant and you kind of try to tie it into what the actual conversation is about. So this is a lot of what I was seeing: the gloating, the shaming, and buckling down, and the whataboutisms. Some people were talking about how it's, we shouldn't gloat, and that we really need to sort of extend this olive branch of peace to the other side, and other people were saying, no, it's not about that, and we have to start calling people out and calling people in so that we can work together. Now, in that context, I want to talk about the easy thing to do versus the right thing to do, because everything I set up here in this context also applies to our personal lives and personal goals, and our business life and business goals as leaders. Because the truth of the matter is, and any marketer out there will tell you this, the truth of the matter is that we make decisions with our emotions and then justify that decision using logic. So the decision is made with our emotions, and the justification, that's where the logic piece comes in. So what we have here is a situation where 70 million people voted one way based on their emotions, but justified with logic, and 74 million people voted another way based on their emotion, but again, justified with logic. And among these, there were some trends. For instance, we know that 52% of white women voted for Trump in 2016. And based on the numbers that I saw, I haven't gotten my hands on the numbers today, but based on the numbers that I saw on Friday this year, 55% of white women voted for Trump. Now, it's easy for me to sit here and judge whether that was the easy thing to do or the right thing to do. And, bringing in my opinions and my judgments and my perspectives in. But because that is the easy thing to do, I will not be doing that. What I will say is that, interestingly enough, many of these white women who did vote for Trump were also in my coaching spaces shining love and light up people's behinds. So that was an interesting trend that I just noticed. And I'm not saying that again in a judgmental way. I'm saying that as in an observational way to just tell you about all of these things that I've seen. What I can tell you is that at the end of the day, 74 million people made a decision to change leadership because more people felt compelled to change our current leadership than did the people who felt that we could continue. And because of that, at the end of the day, we ended up with some historic results. At the end of the day, for the very first time, we have a woman leader. We have a Black woman leader. We have an Indian American woman leader. We have a biracial woman leader following the same administration that put these groups down in so many ways. We also have a first lady who has a background as an educator. So what collectively happened here is that people collectively spoke up for change. Was that the easy thing to do? No, that I can tell you. But they felt that it was the right thing to do, because I don't think anybody across the country thought, said that that the Biden-Harris ticket was the best ticket possible. But it is very telling when we are voting against leadership that we know needs to change. And because it hasn't worked for us, and we don't have the best option, or what we think is the best option. It's sort of, but it was better than the, leadership before. That's what people went for, right? That's what happened here. And it's easy to see where this all comes from the emotional aspect. And I'll get into that when we get into the personal and business goals. But it's easy to gloat. It's easy to shame people. And in many ways, especially if you have been a victim of any harassment or discrimination in the past 4 years, you are justified to kind of push back against those who bullied you. But let's talk about the right thing to do here. And I'm not by any means saying, oh, you gotta, when they go low, we go high. I believe in that. But I'm not pontificating to you or saying that that's what you ought to do. But just think about what the right thing to do here is. Because in any situation, it is easy to ignore ethics over personal interest. It is easy to fall for someone who looks like you and who promises you that they're going to take care of you no matter what their actions may actually end up doing. It is easy to fall into toxic relationships that look amazing on the surface, whether we're talking personally, professionally, or as a country, right? And 74 million people felt that this relationship that we have with our current leadership was toxic, so they chose differently. That's what happened here. Now, does that mean that everything's going to be great? No, because these are still politicians. These are still human beings with records that we may not personally like. And the fact of the matter is these disparities and inequities across, again, gender constructs, racial constructs, and class constructs have been built into our systems and structures, and more constructs actually, have been built into our systems and structures for 450 years now. So are we expecting this next incoming administration to fix everything in America? Is that realistic? No, we have to hold ourselves accountable because that's the right thing to do. Because it's easy to push it off on leadership and say, this is your problem now, fix America. But guess what the truth is? The truth is we are America. I am America. You are America. The right thing to do here is to hold ourselves accountable and to hold our leaders accountable so that they do what we need them to do to make things more equitable, more inclusive, and create changes in our systems and structures that actually, for once, favor all of us and not just some of us, right? We have to, and one example I want to use here is you might come back and say, well, we're just one, I'm just one person. What can I do? Right? The truth of the matter is that is a mindset problem. Because when you say that, you are operating from a space of fear and comfort and complacency. As one person, when each one of these 144 million people voted, that's how our results got tabulated. And it still took each person to individually vote towards this collective action. That is the power of the individual who held themselves accountable to go vote, whether it was in person or with a mail-in ballot. Now, that's all the kind of like the socio-political context. And I don't want this to turn into like a 1 hour thing. So I'm going to bring it down to, let's tie this to business and personal goals because they are highly, highly related, right? When we think about holding ourselves accountable and when we think about holding our leaders accountable and the people around us in our spaces accountable, are we operating from that same space of fear and comfort and complacency, thinking, it doesn't matter whether we speak up or not because I'm only one voice? Now, I will put a caveat in there and say, when you do speak up, make sure it's safe for you, because safety is absolutely paramount. Please don't put yourself in unsafe situations to speak up. There is a time and place to speak up. For instance, if I were in a situation where I found myself surrounded somehow by like 40 or 50 people who don't believe that somebody like me should even exist or have basic human rights, I'm actually going to try and get myself out of that situation as quickly as possible, get in my car and drive away as quickly and safely as possible. Now, on the other hand, if I'm around people who have the openness and the willingness to own their vulnerability and have these conversations to learn and grow together, then my voice is going to be a lot more effective there, right? So keep that context in mind. And within that context, every single one of us has the power. I really want to take a quick moment to flip this into the business side really quick, because every single person of color, every single woman, every single LGBTQIA plus person, every single neurodiverse person, every single person with a visible or invisible disability who has in any way, shape, or form been harassed or discriminated against in the past 4 years went back into their workspaces today after these results came out. Don't ask them if they're okay, because they're still processing it. And we still don't know what the future entails, especially given that we also know that there's 8 lawsuits and all of this other stuff. However, understand that there is a palpable sense that, and I feel this personally, that we finally have leadership that is most likely not going to ban anti-racism inclusion work as anti-American, which means I actually get to do my job without worrying about legal repercussions. So I'm celebrating that. But as a business leader, as a corporate leader, or as a leader of your teams or whatever in any of your spaces, let me ask you this question. Are you talking about the elections in your workspaces? Because again, everything, all of the issues that came up in these elections transcend political issues. And again, people vote, people voted, and people make decisions with their emotions, which means everybody feels a certain way about it. Have you been able to create a safe space where people are able to have these conversations? Probably not in the interest of professionalism, etiquette, courtesy, and the fact that politics don't belong in the workspace. But I'm here to tell you that our corporate structures reinforce, disseminate, and propagate collective attitudes better than any of our other structures, better than our churches, better than our temples, better than our mothers groups, better than our friend circles. The way we act as leaders in our professional spaces, those skills and those attitudes translate into people's personal lives. So if you're holding yourself back from creating safe spaces for your historically marginalized employees in the name of professionalism, in the name of decorum, and in the name of social courtesy, you are not doing yourself any favors, because you are not creating situations or spaces where there is any room for equity and for inclusion. Now, how you create that space, that's outside of this talk, because that really depends on your situation, your individual, organization's needs, and all of that other stuff. But you need to have these conversations and you need to have them without shaming, with a good facilitator, with an excellent moderator who can walk all of you through these conversations, because employees need to be able to air out their concerns and their elation, understand the differences, and still be able to build trust and commitment toward your organization's shared goals and shared purpose. This is how you increase engagement. This is how you increase loyalty. And this is also how you show everybody, whether they're your coworkers, colleagues, subordinates, leaders, you show everybody that accountability, transparency, and accountability are how we move toward equity and inclusion. Because equity and inclusion are not band-aids. They're not. We don't get to fix stuff in like 30 minutes. That's not how any of this stuff works. They are processes. And every step of the process is dependent on what happens in the step before it. And we may have to tweak that step. So it is an involved, committed action to go on that journey. And that journey starts with owning our vulnerabilities as leaders, as employees. Because unless you create this space where these conversations can happen, your employees are not going to be able to tell you that they want to hold you accountable, or that they do secretly hold you accountable, but you just don't know about it. So you don't even know what metrics you should be hitting. And that way, when somebody leaves, you truly don't know why they've left. You're not getting their best contributions. You're not getting their commitment unless you create a space where these conversations happen. So is that easy to do? No. But is that the right thing to do? Yes, because you're thinking about the value added to everybody, where they can have conversations about this and they can find common ground in your shared purpose and your shared goals and your hopeful mission and values toward intentional inclusion. Are you operating from a space of fear and comfort, or are you willing to be uncomfortable to grow? Because as long as you're operating from a place of fear or comfort, you're not going to grow. Growth happens, as one of my dear friends, Bree Jenkins says, growth happens in uncomfortable spaces. Change happens in uncomfortable spaces. Now, this uncomfortable space shouldn't be, doesn't have to be traumatic to people. Again, that's where an excellent moderator or a facilitator comes in. But unless we have these dialogues with each other, we can't talk about the issues of inclusion and equity and justice that were at the foundation of this election. We can't do that. So these conversations have to happen in every space. And finally, my last question to you is, how are you willing to hold yourself accountable? And how are you willing to hold your leadership accountable? Because again, accountability is how we are going to move toward equity and inclusion in the corporate space, in our personal lives, as well as citizens of America. We cannot do this by ourselves, of course, but we can each individually do this so that, just like with this election, the collective impact leads to inclusion for all across any kind of constructs. Now, of course, I do have this framework over here, and this framework is literally about all of this, about how to go from this place of fear and comfort to actively thriving and growing while you empower yourself and while you soar and become a leader. So please feel free to text Inner Fire to 411-321 or to 1909-741-1321 if you're international, and take that free guide and do whatever you need to with it. It has some great tips that have personally helped me, but also tips that have helped my clients and other people I've spoken to. So feel free to take that. And that's about it for me. I will be back on Friday with another live stream. But as you go through this week, my one ask for you, considering it is Manifestation Monday, my one ask for you is, how are you going to manifest the right thing to do, not the easy thing to do? because it's when we focus on the right things, even when they're difficult, that we'll get to where we want to get to. All right? I'll see you on Friday. Bye.